Chapter 314, Possible. The nation of the Evernight, at the peak of the Hornisus mountain range, believed in the ruler of the Evernight. The mother of the sky. Is there some connection between that and the Evernight demonic wolf, Phlegria? The illusory ravings I hear are actually Hornisus Phlegria? What is the connection between the ancient god, Evernight demonic wolf Phlegria, and the goddess? According to Roselle, sequence 0 is equivalent to a true god, and each sequence can only have one sequence 0. The goddess had inherited the power from the Evernight demonic wolf. He wasn't the oldest deity, nor was he the eye of the creator, as he claimed. Yes, there's a circumstantial clue that doesn't count as proof. The life school of thought worships the moon, the crimson moon. That evolved from the creator's eye, but they don't believe in the Evernight goddess. Klein suddenly made several connections as he manipulated the world to speak. Is there nothing else? No. Matters regarding the king of demonic wolves, Phlegria, is also considered a myth in the City of Silver. Derek felt as though he had not given any answers. He suggested out of embarrassment, "Mr. World, you can change to another question." Change the question? Little son, you're too honest, then I won't stand on ceremony. Klein made the world say hoarsely, "Your honesty and trustworthiness leave a deep impression. I met a Beyonder before. He was able to freely switch between the body and spirit, and they were also able to direct zombies. Do you know which pathway this belongs to, and which sequence it is? Although it was impossible for the sun, who is located in the forsaken land of the gods and the City of Silver, to form a connection with the capital of the Lone Kingdom, Backland." Klein was cautious enough to change the pronoun, referring to Miss Sharon, from she to he. By the way, has not a high sequence Beyonder, the world added in a deep voice. Derek recalled the education he had received seriously before saying, "If is not a high sequence Beyonder, then the Phoenix pathway can be eliminated." The Phoenix pathway, Klein deliberately made the world show a certain level of surprise. After attending so many gatherings, Derek was very clear that there was a discrepancy between the terms used by the City of Silver and Miss Justice and Company. Therefore, Derek explained without finding it strange, it's the Beyonder pathway that governs death and partly controls the spirit world. Its sequence 9 is Corpse Collector, so it's the death pathway from the looks of it. Phoenix ancestor, Greg Race. Was death during the ancient times? Klein sat at the end of the long bronze table in a composed manner. He controlled world as he nodded. "I understand. You can continue." Derek replied immediately, "I can only think of two possibilities. One is a type of special devil. Just like I previously said, the devils that evolve from different species can have their differences. There is a type that can freely switch between body and spirit, but they're rather rare, and they might not be able to direct zombies." "Can they be humans?" the world asked. "No, not that I know of any similar examples," Derek said honestly. "What about the second possibility?" Klein thought back to Miss Sharon's usual performance in battle, and the world changed his sitting position. Derek replied seriously, "Mutants." "Mutants? Isn't that referring to monsters?" the world asked hoarsely. Klein clearly remembered that Mr. Azek had mentioned that the term mutant was the general term for humans that were put under a curse. Due to the different curses, mutants transformed into different races. They were usually the same as humans, but their hearts were always filled with a suppressed, twisted desire in their hearts. Their desires erupted when they came into contact with a certain scene or object, turning into monsters. They would then succumb to their desires for blood and bloodshed. Every time they unleashed their desires, they would become slightly more merciless and apathetic. Finally, they would lose all their positive feelings that are expected of a human. The most common mutant was the werewolf. Derek nodded frankly and said, "That's right. Mutants are the various kinds of monsters that evolve from humans due to the negative effects of certain Beyonder characteristics. It's not a curse, but the negative impact of some Beyonder characteristic. Sitting upright in the thick gray fog, Klein found this to be different from what Mr. Azek had described. Is this the understanding of mutants from before the cataclysm? General knowledge in the City of Silver is quite precious to the Beyonders of the northern and southern continents. Klein became increasingly aware of the special nature of the forsaken land of the gods. At this moment, Derek continued, the characteristics which mutants possess happen to form a Beyonder pathway. Therefore, ordinary people can turn into mutants by consuming potions as well. A mutant pathway. Which pathway is this referring to? What is the name of the corresponding sequence 9? Klein asked curiously through the world. Derek ignored the first few questions, treating them as a necessary supplement. In the City of Silver, the corresponding sequence 9 is called prisoner. The mind is the prisoner of the body, and the body is the prisoner of the world. This refers to the madness that is restrained and the desire that is oppressed. Prisoner, this pathway is held by the Rose School of Thought. They're famous for their bloody sacrifices and worship of the so-called chained god. Miss Sharon doesn't look like such a cold-blooded, indiscriminate person. Wait a minute. Merrick was apparently being pursued by some faction. Were he and Miss Sharon traitors of the Rose School of Thought? Their betrayal was because they didn't want to turn into crazy heretics. Klein speculated as he made the world say, "I'm very satisfied with your answer." Transaction complete. Following that, a few members shared their experiences and news. As for Klein, he ended the tarot gathering just before his spirituality was exhausted. When the area above the gray fog returned to its peaceful state, even the fake world was gone. He then started to travel back and forth between the real world and the mysterious space, bringing the master key to the ancient palace. Although I deduce from Roselle's diary that there is a high probability that there isn't a sequence 0 for the apprentice pathway, I can't be rash. If there is a sequence 1 or 2, they might be able to counterattack effectively across space. And what if there really is a sequence 0? I shouldn't gamble with my life. After Klein recovered, he wrote a divination statement, its origin. Next, he held the master key in his hand so as not to misdirect the moniker. Leaning back in his chair, Klein chanted the divination statement and gradually fell asleep. In the gray haze of the shattered world, he saw a bronze lamp rack with many flickering candles. Around the lamp rack was what seemed to be a secret room, devoid of any external light. There were long tables, black iron pots, glass jars, brown-colored notebooks, and other items. A young man wearing a classic black robe stood in front of the long table, staring at the potion in his hand. Ancestors, I am about to embark on the path of extraordinariness. I will definitely reproduce the illustrious glory of the Abraham family. He mumbled to himself and drank the potion. The muscles on his face contorted in pain. Suddenly, he cried out miserably and fell to the ground. He squirmed continuously, strangling himself. After a few seconds, he tore off his clothes, stripped off his skin, and turned into a monster covered in blood. Boom, his flesh exploded, and each piece of flesh seemed to possess a life of its own. As it continued to crawl in every direction, leaving behind signs of corrosion. In the end, they were unable to leave the secret chamber and gradually calmed down. The specks of light gathered together and combined together with a broken finger, forming an ancient and simple-looking brass-colored key. At the same time, Klein saw a silver pocket watch inlaid with diamonds among the tattered clothes. After the dream ended, he opened his eyes and looked forward. He said with a sigh, seriously, he said he wanted to restore the glory of the Abraham family. But he failed at the first step. It's risky even at sequence 9. The Abraham family was a powerful aristocratic family of the Tudor dynasty during the 4th epoch. It was said that they held the Beyonder pathway of apprentice, but it was very likely that it was incomplete. Klein recalled the scene he had just seen. He tapped his fingers on the edge of the table and muttered to himself. He spoke in the Lone language. I can't tell where his accent is from. It was during the last 10 years since it became popular to embed pure diamonds into pocket watches. Perhaps I should visit the Harvest Church when I have the time and ask Father Utravsky where he got his master key from. Perhaps I can find some clues. Just as Klein was about to leave the fog, the illusory star that symbolized the magician began to swell and contract. Furs was requesting a sacrificial ritual. Furs usually wouldn't have carried so much cash on her, but she had been planning to attend a Beyonder gathering. So she had left 500 pounds to see if she could buy what she wanted. Who knew that the corresponding gathering had been cancelled because of the circumstances? Now, she could use it to pay for the apothecary formula and the acting method, a total of 430 pounds. Seeing the screen of light appear and seeing the paper money disappear, it took Furs a few seconds to react. She sincerely thanked Mr. Fool. I shall sell the apothecary formula to Viscount Glane for 300 pounds. I can't be too greedy, or else this will ruin our long-term partnership. As for Miss Audrey, I'll ignore her for the time being. She has hopes of coming into contact with the psychology alchemists and obtaining the corresponding formula directly. If there's really no hope with that, I'll try purchasing it from the tarot gathering side. I have to see if the acting method is effective. If it is, then I have to consider how to pray to Mr. Fool. Oja is such a fool. She has always been acting as an arbiter and had unknowingly fulfilled the requirements of the acting method. Furs began thinking of the future. When he received the 430 pounds, Klein also received a prayer from Miss Justice. She said that if Mr. Fool's adorer no longer needed cash, she could promise to exchange the 200 pounds for Roselle's diary entries to make sure that Mr. Fool was satisfied. I'm satisfied. I'm only a few dozen pounds short of 1,000 pounds. Klein declined Miss Justice's offer. Then, he busily helped the son awaken his memories regarding the 7 gods. After doing all this, Klein returned to the real world in exhaustion. He drew the curtains open and started going through the dossier with the information regarding the serial murders, searching for the animal that might have existed.